Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. President Obama wraps up a two-day nuclear summit in Washington with the Obama administration stressing the urgency of the threat of nuclear terrorism. Joining us from Washington is Dr. James Carafano, a senior research fellow for national security at the Heritage Foundation. He is a leading expert in defense affairs, intelligence, military operations and strategy, and homeland security. Welcome to Newsmax TV, Jim.
Good to be with you.
President Obama wants there to be better control of unsecured stocks of nuclear materials, given the possibility a terrorist organization could obtain a nuclear weapon. What do you believe Obama can accomplish with the summit, and is his goal an achievable one?
Well, I don't know what he can actually accomplish with the summit. This, of course, is not a new issue. I mean, the world's really been fixated on this since 9/11. President Bush actually did an enormous amount to work on this. He started the Proliferation Security Initiative, which was really path-breaking in terms of getting international cooperation in working on the trafficking of material and technology. So there's been a lot done on this. I don't know if we actually needed a summit to advance the cause more, but certainly anything that can be done to reduce the amount of highly enriched uranium or plutonium that's available for either bad actors or non-state actors to get a hold of is a good idea.
On the Sunday morning shows and as the summit got underway, the administration underscored the threat of nuclear terrorism. Given missile defense cuts, its policy on Iran, and policies on terrorism, do you think that this administration has a real grasp of the threat?
No, I actually don't. I think the problem is that while the president may say we need to focus on nuclear terrorism and everybody thinks that's great, most of our strategies that he's implementing are actually increasing the likelihood of proliferation. Cutting missile defense makes you more vulnerable. That makes nuclear weapons more attractive. Declaring that you're not going to modernize means your weapons are older and less usable. It's a less credible deterrent. Again, that's another incentive to modernize. We've done nothing really to deter Iran or North Korea. And every time North Korea or Iran advance in their programs and only advance their own programs, it's advertising, and both those countries are very, very willing proliferators. And then the third problem is that other countries may feel that the U.S. deterrent is less reliable and they need their own nuclear weapons. So I think the likelihood of proliferation using the strategies the administration has adopted is actually increasing the likelihood that there's going to be more nuclear powers and more nuclear weapons available.
Okay, Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, Gordon Brown of Great Britain, Kevin Root of Australia, and King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. What do you make of the fact that some of our allies chose not to attend this summit?
Well, I think this administration is a real problem. It has gone out of its way to reach out to oppositional and to aggressive regimes, Iran, North Korea, Russia, China, and in many cases the United States has gotten rebuffed. It's gotten nothing from the Russians and the Chinese in terms of helping with Iran. The Iranian president has mocked the president of the United States. North Korea, of course, has done nothing to change their programs. And on the other hand, many of our allies have either been ignored or not consulted. I mean, we can go into a long list of the many pronouncements that this administration has made and not actually consulted with allies. So his track record of actually engaging friends and allies and building trust and confidence has actually been pretty poor. And the fact that some key people decided not to attend the summit just kind of demonstrates that.
Now, the U.S. and Russia just agreed to a new START treaty which puts limits on nuclear weapons. Some reports suggest that Russia has as much as a 10-to-1 advantage over the U.S. in the smaller but still very dangerous tactical weapons category. The proposed agreement doesn't hold the Russians accountable with such tactical weapons. Is this a serious oversight?
Well, it's really hard to see what the U.S. gains out of this treaty. Okay, we both cut some nuclear weapons, but the Russians can actually deploy a lot more launchers, and if they choose to cheat, they can put multiple warheads on those launchers, and they actually have a lot more strategic weapons than we have. This doesn't include tactical nuclear weapons, and there the Russians have a huge nuclear advantage. But the thing we really have to focus on is the reason the president says we're doing this is because this is going to lead on a road to zero, a world without nuclear weapons. And we know for a fact that that's not going to happen. Nuclear weapons are the cornerstone of the Russian defense policy. They're important to them. They've stated this publicly. They have no interest in getting rid of nuclear weapons. All we've done is really kind of put them on parity with us, which actually encourages them to continue to emphasize nuclear weapons.
Now, does entering into a pact with a power like Russia signal to other nations, and especially rogue regimes, that the U.S. is a declining power?
Well, I think this is very troubling. We're not in an arms race with Russia. So why do we have to sign an arms control treaty with Russia? Let's say China decides to raise their inventory or do something aggressive. For us to do anything, we're going to have to go back and first negotiate with the Russians. So why we've locked ourselves into the strategic relationship with Russia, it really kind of makes no sense. It strengthens Russians' positions. If we want to do anything regarding anybody else, we've got to go back and negotiate with the Russians first. The United States and the Russians don't even agree on what the treaty means in regard to missile defense. It's really hard to see where there's a tremendous strategic advantage for the United States in signing the treaty.
Now, the Obama administration claims that the U.S. nuclear arsenal remains as strong as ever. In your opinion, is our nuclear arsenal as strong as ever, and do you believe that START, if ratified, will weaken it?
Well, I think it's simply a lie. Our nuclear weapons are old, they're aging, there's better technology, they're not really usable for many of the kinds of missions that we would envision as an effective nuclear deterrent today. We're losing an entire generation of nuclear scientists who even know how to build these things. So the argument that our nuclear inventory is just fine has been disputed widely by scientists and credible reports. And I mean, it's just not logical. I mean, if you think about it, if you had a car and you had that car for 70 years and did nothing to it, it's not as dependable as it was 60, 70 years ago. So I mean, on its face, I think it's a pretty bold and unsubstantiated claim.
And that modernization, I know, is something that Republicans are really concerned about. Senate Republicans and Senator Joe Lieberman are threatening to block ratification of the START treaty unless the administration proposes adequate plans to modernize the nation's existing nuclear weapons arsenal. Do you believe that Republicans will indeed put a stop to START?
Well, the president's already in violation of the law. I mean, the Defense Authorization Act of last year required for him to put together a modernization plan before he signed the START treaty. He didn't do that. As a matter of fact, the president flatly declared in the Nuclear Posture Review, which is the 5-year plan, which came out last week, which he said we're not going to modernize. So I think there's a real issue here. I mean, we have to get beyond numbers. An effective nuclear deterrent is just that. It's an effective nuclear deterrent. If you have large city killer weapons that you're never planning on using, and everybody knows that, that's not an effective deterrent. If you have weapons that you can't really ensure the reliability of that stockpile, if you have better technology that would allow you to have safer weapons that would put less lives at risk but would still achieve military objectives, why wouldn't you do that? I mean, it makes no sense not to modernize our inventory.
Now, it's clear that Tehran wants to be the preeminent power in the Middle East and dictate to neighbors and even Europe. Obama acknowledges that new sanctions might fail. What options does Obama have left if sanctions fail? And do you believe he would ever resort to a military option? Well,
I mean, I think this administration is unfortunately creating the seeds of confrontation. I mean, it may come down to it. If the administration is really serious that they're not going to have a nuclear Iran, then the only option is going to be force. And they're creating the conditions and where that's the only option that they're going to have. And then we'll see. I mean, I think that, we're headed for another Cuban Missile Crisis. And this one, I think we may blink this time.
Dr. Carafano, would an American threat of military action against Iran be viewed as credible internationally?
Not now, I don't think so. I mean, I think the administration has, we're cutting conventional capability. We canceled the F-22. The president is talking about pulling out of Iraq. He's talking about pulling out of Afghanistan. I don't think anybody would take the threat of military action by this president as a really serious threat right now.
Do you think that Obama is fulfilling his constitutional duty to provide for the common defense?
No, I don't. The president said, my goal is to have a world without nuclear weapons. That's not what the Constitution says the president's job is. The president's job is to keep Americans safe, to provide for the common defense. Ronald Reagan wanted a world without nuclear weapons, and it's a noble vision. But Reagan's notion was peace through strength. Reagan put the United States in a position of strength first, and then he negotiated some of the steepest nuclear reduction in the history of the world. This president's not taking that course.
All right, Dr. James Carafano, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate your insight.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.